Sitting on a gold mine. I selected that song because it says exactly what we're about to dive into, and that is, or at least it talks about the source of the gold. We're all sitting on a gold mine. Every one of us have this amazing value within us, this amazing freedom within us. And the gold mine is, I mean, you think about it, you go dig for the gold, you dig it out, you get it out of the mine, you get it out of the hole, and you turn it into something valuable. Well, questions do just that, because the gold mine is your own consciousness. The gold mine is your connection, as Lee talked about so beautifully, with source. You know, we are all birthed out of source, but we're not out of source. We're still in it, fully 100% connected to this infinite consciousness, this infinite power. And so questions talk about the quest you're on. Okay, somebody write that one down. That's from my good friend. Let's see. I'll get back to it. The real question for us all is, how do we access that? And the way, how do we get in touch with, how do we bring it forward through us? Well, here's the kicker. You already are. Our thought, our individual thought, is generated from that universal consciousness as your thoughts. So it's really important then in our understanding of life that we take seriously what we're thinking about, and that we pay attention to what we're thinking about. Because what we obsess about and think about a lot is what ends up creating in our lives. You know, the whole world fell into great fear for a while about illnesses and such, and they were real, but they definitely were part of the ongoing belief that there's value in illness, value in, you know, it's big business. So there's a lot of reason for that to be true. And mind can only create what we ask it to. Now, it's creating on a much bigger scale than our individual lives, but our individual lives somehow fit into it. That's why we call it universal intelligence. That's the first word and description I heard of an infinite power or God when I first joined this movement. And I was relieved by that, because it took me out of and away from all of my old conceived notions about God. So I didn't use the G word for a long time, and it was all okay that way. So the second half of that, the first half is we create our experience by what we believe, by what we were given and our beliefs, by where we started, our cultural, our family, our schooling, all of those things. I always believed I was dumb. And I got lots of chances to show that to people and forget and mix up and get things, until I discovered that what I thought was my IQ, that I had secretly snuck into the teacher's desk and read, wasn't my IQ. It was some other number that had nothing to do with that. And then I found out I'm smarter than I thought. You know, and my whole life changed at that point, because I quit thinking of myself as not quite smart. And the number was so low, I wouldn't have been able to function in the way I function if it had been true. So some of you may still think that's true, but that's okay. I like you anyway. So the question then is, and I'll use this first one. Whoops, there it went. The question, the first one we're going to look at, which is right in line with what I was just talking about, is how do you know what you're supposed to be doing while we're here in our current situation, or in our current, incarnation? Where's your passion? Where is that thing that pulls you and that talks to you? And to find it out, to know for sure, is to look at the deep questions you have. In other words, the question of why is this, or what does that mean, or what does this do, or what is it that really drives you? Those deep questions are the ones that spirit responds to, that the infinite intelligence responds to, and with learning to listen can give you your own guidance. No one else knows what your path should be but you. As smart as I think I am, and I can probably give you lots of advice, the advice is meaningless unless it resonates with that truth within you. And because your path is unique. Your version of this infinite intelligence is unique. And it comes forth and forward through you by asking the right questions. And by right, I mean not good or bad, but the right ones for you. Your questions may not be the same as mine. But when we ask them, and then we listen. And this is where meditation comes in. This is where being quiet comes in. This is where going deeper into what's the possibility for me. And then being quiet and listening. Because it's incredible how those answers eventually, if you keep asking, will pop in. Ernest Holmes talked a lot about meditation, but when he talked about meditation, he was talking about contemplation, not necessarily meditation as we think of it from the yogic traditions or some of those others. He was talking about taking a question or a word or an idea and just sitting quietly and contemplating it, letting it roll through your mind over and around and again until something begins to show up. One of the things we often say is, I may not know the answer to this question, but something in me knows. If it's my question, something in me knows the answer. And that something is that infinite intelligence that's right there. So all we need to do is be open to that and continue to ask the question until we get an answer. As someone who is new to CSL, where should I start? Which books should I read? I think the most powerful, important book to read at the very beginning is The Power of Decision by Raymond Charles Barker. It is a very approachable, almost a secular sounding book at times, and it gives you a real opportunity to get the ideas of this teaching as applied to the simple business of choice. He's talking about the power of choice. When you choose a path, you're setting a whole world of things in motion. When you chose to come here this morning, you set a whole world of things in motion that happen. So when that happens, that you choose and you go that way. And that's one of the books. The other book I would recommend is this thing called You, which is by Ernest Holmes. And it's one of his smaller books, but it talks about who we really are. And it's written as if he's really talking to you. So I always encourage people to read it out loud and to think and read it slowly, contemplate it as you go, and see what feelings shift or change in that process, in that business. There are lots of other books, but that's where I would encourage you to start. At some point later into the textbook. The textbook was written in the one version we use the most was written in 1932 and has been revamped some, but it's not the most accessible because of the style in which it's written, and which is why we teach classes about it so that we can help make it more accessible. However, if you read the 1926 textbook, which was the first version, it is very accessible. And it reads as if he's talking to you again. I have a lot of questions about that second one, how much of it he did and how much his helpers did in terms of Ernest Holmes. But that first one, that 1926, is just a Q&A all the way through it. So it's I think it's a cool place to go next after you've done some of the other things. This is a great question. It says, would God give us what we desire specifically, or is it better to open ourselves to receiving something we haven't considered because that is God's will? God's will is for you to live life freely and richly and abundantly, joyfully, healthily, all of those things. As far as specifically, that's up to you. That's up to you. It's kind of like the gift has been given. We've been given this thing called life, and we have the freedom to use it. And so we get to choose specifically what we want to do and how we want to use that power. Again, that power is not some mystical thing coming from outside of us. It is within our own thought and our own power and our own process to come forward. I think one of the things that there's written in, I can't remember now for sure which books, but one of the books talks about if you do a non-specific treatment, you get a non-specific response. And to me, treatment is the way in which we line our minds up, as Lee said, with that flow of consciousness, that flow of ideas, that flow of knowledge. And from that knowledge and those ideas comes the manifestation in the real world of things to be. So it's really important. There are a lot of jokes and things around about people who sometimes, you treat for prosperity and you get a new credit card in the mail because you weren't specific about what prosperity means to you. Well, for me, prosperity is not getting the credit card. That's an invitation to disaster in terms of life and spending things I may not have and all of that nonsense. So the idea is to get as specific as you can, not about the how this is going to come about, but get specific about the what, by visioning and imagining the picture you want to see yourself become. And know that every bit of that includes the idea of this and or something better. Because we don't want to limit things, but we want to be open to the bigger and the better idea. And that's where I think the openness comes, but we have to start from somewhere. So we start from what we think we want, or what we do want. Passion and desire is about what we want, and that is not a bad thing. I grew up thinking if it felt good, it was wrong, and got taught that a lot. But this is not that. This teaching flips that on its ear and says, your deep desires and your passions are the things that you are here to do and to follow and to move forward on. And they're good. They're good and very good because they can only come from one place. They only come from consciousness, your consciousness. Yeah. How do we use this power to improve our lives? I first read that as loves. I'm not sure which it is. Either way, it's the same thing or the same answer. We use it by getting conscious about what we want to be. It requires staying awake. And that's one of the hardest things today for people to do is to stay awake, I think. We are so invited to be part of a world of sleep, of not being awake, and of being able to appear to be, but I can put myself to sleep for hours without getting a minute of sleep in front of YouTube or Facebook or things that appear to be connecting me with people around me, and yet it really isn't. It's really just allowing me to ignore what's going on inside of me and allowing me to go to sleep in that respect. The power that matters is the power within us, not the power that's out there somewhere. And okay, Lord has set me a curve here. That's a good thing. We'll get to that in a minute. So by first becoming aware and believing in the idea that your thought, your ideas, your beliefs begin to direct your life. Also, learning and recognizing that you can choose your beliefs. Now, you may not believe them to start with, but if you work with them and if you think about them and you contemplate them, you can shift your belief out of perhaps like one of duality that says there's a big evil world out there trying to get me, or which was one of my life beliefs for a long time, into the idea there's only one power, and that power shows up as me, in me, through me, and in everything that is the oneness of life that shows up. There is a lot of opportunity through meditation, through spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer to shift those thoughts and thinking, and then to watch what happens in your life. The other way to help it that it improves your life is you see what's being reflected back to you. Because if you want to know what you think and believe about life, look at what's happening in yours. Look at what is being done and experiencing out there in your world, because it's a direct reflection. The way you see it and understand it is a direct reflection of your beliefs. That was hard. Still is sometimes. I don't want to believe that. I want to say it's their fault. It's not me. I didn't create this. But on some level, my acceptance of whatever is going on in my acceptance of nonsense in the world can also reflect itself back to me. The more I do it, it's like a loop. But the more I accept the idea of love, peace, harmony, joy, all of those good things, the more I see that in the world. Maybe in the same situations even. So it's a really interesting question. It's a great question. Oh boy, here's a good one. When asked by someone, a religious person of either Catholicism or Protestantism or some of those, what is our teaching? What is your short elevator response? It changes. It changes all the time, and it may be a lot to do with who the person is that asks. But one of the things I like to say, and one of the things I truly believe, is that we honor all paths to God. We honor all religions, the truth that is available in all religions. We don't honor the nonsense. And there's nonsense in all of us and all religions. So what I say is we believe in the goodness of life. We believe in you. And we believe that God is constantly and fully, imminently involved in our lives. Not because it's out there somewhere coming in, but because we're living within it. We are part of it in that respect. That usually fosters a lot of questions. One of the questions that usually follows that is, well, what about Jesus? What do we think about him? Is he God? Is he the Son of God? My response to that is always the same thing. You bet. And so are you. Unless you're a woman, then you're a daughter of God. We are all expressions of the divine, and Jesus was a great example, not the great exception. And he's been treated so long as the great exception. One of my early teachers used to say, Jesus pointed the way, and we've been studying his fingernail ever since. And I think there's some truth in that. But in this teaching, what we attempt to do is look at what he did, what that story tells us happened, and it's a picture of the understanding from 2,000 years ago of what it means to be a fully God-inspired, God-held individual. He said all the time, the Father in me does the work. He also said that everything I do, you can do and more, which kind of fits with a Holmes quote I found for today that says something, such is the power of right thinking that it cancels and erases everything unlike itself. It answers every question, solves every problem. It is the solution to every difficulty. Ernest Holmes said this in the first Science of Mind textbook. So right thinking is the answer to a big part of that, as it was for Jesus, as it was for Muhammad, and on it goes, to all of the great spiritual leaders. It is fascinating to me that, you know, among the Hindus, they see Jesus as a great prophet. And those who study Allah and follow that religion also see him as a prophet and see that story as a prophet, but not as the only prophet. And there's a whole lot of history there that I don't have time to go into, so I will not do that. But just know that there's the Jesus story that we know was not the first one that showed up with that story. It goes back centuries before the 2,000-year ago version that we know the best. And in various versions with various expressions, that all of which point to the same thing, that God incarnate in us is what matters. So my dear friend and sometimes speaker here, Lorna Bradley, has sent me a question, and I'm grateful to you, Lorna. There it is. I try to believe in good, ultimate good, all the time, but I believe COVID shook my faith. Can you explain or give some insight into how COVID fits into it's all good all the time? The chaos, the fear, the loss of loved ones, and it's still happening. What's going on? I can get rich with that question, maybe. I probably not. I know my ideas about it. I don't know the ultimate answer on that. That's an important question for all of us to ask. I do believe in the ultimate good. I also believe that nothing is done to us in life. It is always done for us. Our world has had a lifelong dance in, as I said earlier, in valuing ill health. There's a great value in being sick. Think about it. In many families, that's how you get attention. My dear grandmother, bless her heart, she, that's a Southern expression, by the way, she, anytime life got to be too much, she had a heart attack. Now, she only had one heart attack ever in her life, and that's the one that killed her when she was 80-something or other. All of those other heart attacks were hysterical, or anxiety attacks or whatever. But when she would do them, the family would gather from all over, wherever they were living. My uncle would fly down from Detroit, and we'd have people coming in, and everybody'd come and gather in the hospital, and we'd all be there for her for a little while, and then she'd get better and go home, and we'd all go back to our various places. But that's how there was such value for her in being ill. And it served her well. Now, she didn't consciously decide to do that. But that was the pattern from her deeper thinking. I think the human race has for a long time put a lot of energy and power in ill health, even as we've attempted to heal from it. Because if you're fighting against something, you're giving it more power. And I think part of what happened was I see the COVID experience as the great pause. It was a pause in our world. It was a pause for all of us. It pulled us out of that unconscious rat race so many people were in, into a more conscious, isolated, yes, but a more internal, focusing on what matters in here. Now, yes, it is sad that people who left the planet, but I don't believe life ends when you leave the planet. It's just your physical life that ends. We are eternal beings. So that doesn't mean it isn't tragic and sad, but it does mean that it isn't the end. And that wasn't the end. And people who left the planet then, who knows what the big story of that's going to be in the future. Those who believe in reincarnation have said every time there's been a big mass exodus like that, whether Holocaust or here or other things, that there's a way in which it turns around, because those souls, those people are ready to come back and bring us to another level. I'm not an expert in that. I'm not going to pretend to be. But that's the much of the thought about it. And that's not a particularly science of mind idea, but it's a general spiritual idea. So that's our Q&A for today. And I am very grateful to all of you who asked questions. I encourage you to keep asking your questions, because they define the quest you're on. That's why they're questions. I love that little play on words. I didn't originate it. I picked it up somewhere on the web. But the quest you're on is about the direction you're going, the way that you're going to move, and your questions can guide you in that. I mean the deep down ones that really get you, and you find yourself wondering about. Keep wondering about them, because that wondering is what opens you up to that guidance and to those better ideas within you. You are wonderful, and you have everything you need already. And I'm just mostly here to remind you of that, because you are wonderful, so am I, and so it is. And now